Thank you for joining us today for the second of our virtual town hall series on the impact of COVID-19. I'm Heather Bagnall, your delegate in District 33. I first wanted to thank you all for your continued commitment to stay safe by staying home and practicing physical distancing and safe protocols while traveling within our communities, providing us the time to build out the systems required to combat this virus. Yesterday, for the first time, the Senate Finance and Budget and Tax Committees held a nearly 9 hours virtual joint hearing on the issues with the unemployment insurance, pandemic unemployment assistance, and the new Beacon portal. Immediately following this virtual town hall, the House Economic Matters Committee will have a briefing with the Department of Labor and the administration where they will be seeking answers to the many questions that were raised in yesterday's hearing and raised by so many of you to our office. I have shared the link to view the briefing on my Facebook page, and we have shared it in the comments section here. For this reason, I am scheduling an additional town hall, which will be focused solely on unemployment. So if you have a question today, my staff who are on this call will take the information and bring it to the committee, or you can email your questions to my office. Tonight at 5 p.m., Governor Hogan will be announcing the latest strategies for phase 1 of the reopening. So today's discussion on the economic impact of COVID-19 is timely as we consider how best to reopen, the recovery resources available, new operational protocols, and how we can ensure consumer confidence so we can help rather than hurt small businesses as we reopen. I am honored to be joined today by our esteemed panel, Secretary Kelly Schulz from the Department of Commerce, CEO of the Greater Severna Park and Arnold Chamber of Commerce, Liz League, and the CEO of the Greater Crofton Chamber of Commerce, Alissa Santoro. As you can imagine, our panelists are very tightly scheduled, so we will attempt to answer all questions, but if we can't get to your question on the call, we will circle back with you to make sure you have answers. If you have a question and have not submitted it in advance, please feel free to put your question in the chat or to submit it in the Facebook comments. I also wanted to thank my team, Max Pierce, Jenna Bachman, and Luke Tudball, who are working behind the scenes and once again making me look far more tech savvy than I actually am. With that, I'm honored to introduce our State Secretary of Commerce, Kelly Schulz, who even before this pandemic was changing the narrative on collaboration between state and local governments. And since this crisis has been front and center across the state. Secretary Schulz, I so appreciate you being here today to talk about where we are, what's coming, and how we can help our Maryland business community, both the employers and the employees, to remain safe and solvent.
Great. Thank you so much, Delegate. I can't thank you enough just for having me here. We've done, I think I've done personally over 83, 84, 85 of similar types of conversations between other elected officials and members of the business community and organizations so that we can get as much information out to the community as we possibly can, which, as you know, can be difficult in the best of times. But when we're under a stay-at-home order, it's a little bit more difficult. So these types of conversations have been very, very helpful, and I appreciate your constituency for joining your efforts as well. So much appreciated. I guess I'd like to start, and of course would like to have questions once I give my update on anything that you or your constituents may feel important today. But obviously we do know that the governor has announced that he is going to make some additional announcements about the stay-at-home orders and others as we move into our next phases of recovery, and wanted to give you a little bit of insight as to how the Department of Commerce has helped to fit into that. Obviously, our mission has changed a great deal at the Department of Commerce, whereas we are an agency of roughly around 200 individuals whose mission is to be able to expand and grow businesses in the state and also to attract new businesses into the state. For the last 2+ months, we have been doing nothing other than trying to sustain businesses in the state. And so that has been a shift in our daily opportunities and challenges, but nonetheless, I'm very proud of the team that has grown into this and is 100% completely dedicated to the health and well-being of our business community. So around the end of March, shortly about 2 weeks after the stay-at-home order went into place, our Office of Tourism was having communications with, some of those most immediately hit types of industries, and that would be, a broader picture of the tourism industry, breaking it down into accommodations, destinations, attractions, restaurants, retail, the sports community, right? So what do all of those groups need to have in order to be able to move into a reopening recovery type of phase? And so over that period of time, with those initial conversations with those advisory groups, we started immediately working with a document from the AEI, American Enterprise Institute, that everyone I think is very familiar with at this point in time, penned by Scott Gottlieb, who is now on the governor's recovery team as well, and a former commissioner for the FDA. And what that laid out was a phased-in approach and how entities could look at that phased-in approach and kind of create their own pathway to recovery. So we put it in an outline form and started working specifically with these industry groups to be able to make sure that they could provide some proposed solutions and proposed best practices for that period of time when the governor felt comfortable with the numbers in the state and with the amount of resources that we have in the state. If there was a possible resurgence, that those guidance could go out to those industry groups. So last week, there was an announcement that outdoor recreation like golfing and hiking and boating and different types of opportunities there was going to reopen. So with that, the Department of Commerce, with the information that we had received from the advisory groups, and also in consultation with the Maryland Department of Health, put out what are now our advisory documentations and guidance and best practices. So if people want to go to our website at open.maryland.gov/back-to-business, they'll be able to see an example of the type of guidance that we're putting out for these specific industry groups. We have right now uploaded on that site guidance for golf and marinas because that was last week's order. We are in the process today of putting together additional potential guidances based on the advisory group's recommendations, and those will go up as soon as the governor makes his final announcements at 5 o'clock. But anyone can go to that site that we have at open.maryland.gov, G-O-V, that will be able to get them some information that they or their businesses may need. But not just for specific businesses, even though we have, concentrated on that, we realize that the general public also needs some guidance, so how do you and I go out into the world and behave, and what's our responsibility in this particular effort to keep ourselves healthy and safe, to keep our families healthy and safe, to keep the employees healthy and safe, and just the general public and those customers that may be frequenting those establishments. So there will also be a general guidance that will go up to be able to assist people, and some of those details that may not be apparent as to what the new rules of the road may be when we're visiting some of these establishments. So we're looking forward to continuing with that. We also, at the department, have some of our employees who are assisting with some of the procurement options over at the State Emergency Operations Center, working alongside MEMA and Department of General Services on making sure that we have some of our businesses that are ready to be vetted and in order to be able to respond to the need for PPE, for example. What type of manufacturers can be able to offer that to the general public and to the government. We partnered with the Maryland Manufacturing Extension Partnership in order to be able to create a database. It's kind of like a matchmaking database, and it's really very extraordinary, I think, where a manufacturer can put in information about what they are able to produce, how much they're able to produce, and then that list will be created, is actually being created. And then also for buyers, so if there's local health departments or local businesses who have the need during this period of time to purchase any of this from Maryland businesses, they can put in their needs, and the Maryland business manufacturers can actually find them and reach out to them. So it's an extraordinary tool, and I'm glad that we're able to respond with that. One of the funds that we were asked to put together by the governor at the beginning of the relief process is a manufacturing innovation fund, and that is grants of up to $100,000 going to existing Maryland businesses for possibly the purchase of new equipment or the training of employees to respond to those items that are on the critical needs list that we've all heard about, that our first responders, our healthcare workers, nursing homes may need, and the Department of Health creates that critical needs list, and it fluctuates. But for those companies that have responded to this grant application, we have funded over 50 businesses at this point in time, and they're doing some extraordinary things with really just sometimes just altering their normal daily practices of what they have produced in the past, and sometimes, you know, completely changing the ability of what they had done. And so we're seeing some great stories of businesses that continue to supply those types of materials to the state and to the private sector as well. And with that, Delegate, I know that you and or your constituents probably have some very specific questions for me. So I'm here to be able to assist.
Thank you so much. We do, and thank you for your time. I did want to take an opportunity to acknowledge that we also have Adam Spangler from Congressman Brown's office on the line, who is here gathering information as well. So thank you for being here. I was hoping, Secretary Schulz, that you could speak a little bit to the partnership between the Department of Commerce and the Department of Health, because even though we tend to have these conversations as siloed conversations, obviously there is a lot of overlap in terms of how we are crafting policy to keep our consumers safe, to keep our employers and our employees safe, and in partnership with the health department in terms of the procurement of PPE, but also in terms of developing those protocols that that speak to individual industries.
Absolutely. So I'll just say, you know, 2 months ago, I never thought that I would have so many conversations with epidemiologists and local health offices, but that seems to be, you know, a big part of our day. And I'll just acknowledge that I think all of our sister agencies are on a good day, pretty good at communicating and making sure that we have that collaboration, but it has been just nonstop to where there is real overlap as to who's doing what, and the different types of task forces and teams that are out there that have been created through the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, and others has really consisted of several state agencies who have never kind of played in this market before, but who are really learning very quickly as to how to do that. But I think specifically with the recovery, our very close contact with the Department of Health has been on an ongoing basis to look at and review some of those advisory group recommendations, and to be able to say, okay, Department of Health, are you comfortable with this and the approach of this this reopening plan, or are there some other things that you think that, you know, could be recommended in order to be able to assist as a best practice? And I would say, for the most part, the recommendations that we got from the advisory groups were spot on. You know, there was a little bit of, you know, tweaking a little, you know, here and there, but most, I think, of those small businesses and industry associations were able to look at, kind of what some national best practices had been, or looking at other states that were doing something, or really reviewing the CDC guidance that had been out there. So I would say, for the most part, it has just been, a lot of fact checking with the Department of Health, understanding that we want some consistency, and they want consistency because their interactions with the local health offices are really going to be instrumental in getting them some guidance on what the intent and the expectations are, so that there is a consistency of health officers across the state.
I really appreciate that. I know that we've spoken before, and a lot of people are aware of my background outside of the legislature that I come from the arts industry, which was heavily impacted very early on. It was one of the first industries, arts and entertainment, that were closed down, and they're sort of the last in the phase in the multi-phase road to recovery to come back. So how you had talked a little bit about working with the tourism industry and the arts industry, and how are we looking at sort of keeping that industry solvent long enough to get it back online?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. And one of the great joys about being at the Department of Commerce is that typically we're able to do some fun stuff with our tourism industry and with our Maryland State Arts Council and all of the good people that are associated with those events. So huge credit goes out to the Arts Council and what they were able to develop in a very short period of time alongside some of our other grant programs. They were looking at their internal grants and some additional funds that they had for other purposes. And so they decided to roll all of that together into a $1 million relief grant for the arts community. And obviously it's a little bit less than what some of the other programs have had, but I think that they have been able to help and assist. Understanding arts is such a big part of our community, and want to be able to make sure that we can keep some of these, the smallest of the arts individuals afloat. I think that was really important for them to consider. And we'll have to all reach out and, try to see what we can do to assist them throughout the entire recovery process. But I give them great kudos for their ability to do that.
I think a big concern that a lot of constituents are voicing is seeing what's happening in some of the other states where they're opening, and then they're seeing a resurgence in cases and in hospitalizations. And what is the state looking at in terms of how we pivot if we do see a resurgence, even with this phased in strategic approach? There are some models that are saying we may see a resurgence around the end of June or the beginning of July, and what are we looking at in terms of preparation to pivot?
Right, and so because I do not spend all of my time over at the Department of Health, this is what I will say as far as the governor's perspective on this. And the reason for a more slow approach to the phases, perhaps, that Governor Hogan has, is because of the realization that he wanted to be able to make sure that he had his 4 buckets that were kind of filled or more filled by the time we started a reopening recovery phase. And those are making sure that we have an increased number of tests that are occurring. And just today, another testing drive-through site opened in Carroll County, and we're hearing about all of those different types of activities over many days now, making sure that there's an increased number of hospital beds should there be a resurgence. And we're not getting those beds right now because they're in need today, but he wants to be able to make sure that if there is a need, that we have them there. Making sure that we have enough stockpiles with the personal protection equipment, face masks, gowns, all of those critical needs that can be utilized for the reopening of businesses as well as the healthcare industry. And so I think when you put all of that together, I think there has been a broad understanding of the fact that it's not that we are waiting for COVID-19 to disappear and go away. It's being able to make sure that we can manage that part of our healthcare system in a reasonable way should there be an increase in the number of cases.
Mm-hmm. And you had spoken about the protocols for the general public and how we get that information out. And I think that's a big question that a lot of us have, because we want to make sure that as we open, when we're establishing these protocols, that we're not actually putting businesses in more jeopardy than we would if we remain closed. So I know it's a balancing act between keeping people solvent and moving forward the economy. How do we get this information out? Like, what are the strategies that we're looking at for making sure people know what the new processes are for these businesses?
I will say a lot of it, and it's the partnership that we have with people like you, Delegate, to help to assist us with that. And I know our office has tried and has been very successful in communicating with members of the General Assembly, other elected officials. I am on weekly phone calls with the governor and all of the county executives. I'm also on a weekly call with all of the municipal leaders, and I'm doing town hall type activities like this, multiple times a day. And it's relying on our partners who we typically partner with every day, or should be partnering with every day, to be able to help to share that information. And respectfully, even the folks that are on the call today, to be able to make sure that they understand that, now they can be an ambassador to be able to communicate what information is out there. Information is very, very difficult to get out to the general public. We can put out 5 press releases a day on different type of information, and it's just dependent on who is going to be listening or hearing for that type of information.
Yeah, I remember we actually had that conversation at the, I was on a work group with you on economic development in Anne Arundel County, and we were having the same conversation about it. And that was long before we were in the middle of a pandemic.
That's right, and it can be tough, but I think that if we're all dedicated to it, and I'll give one example. It's interesting how good information doesn't make it out to the general public, but sometimes not good information is making it out to the general public. And last week and the week before, there were pictographs and charts that were circulating that was implied that this time frame of reopening our economy was tied to the governor's plan, when in fact it has never been tied to the governor's plan. But I got more emails about that false document than I've ever had questions about the documents that are actually out there and accurate. So it's a management of, that.
Is that the one that had like identified different months for the phase out? So that didn't, just to clarify for our viewers, so that was not official document from the governor's office.
That was not an official document from the governor's office, and the person that put that together is not affiliated with the governor or the governor's recovery team. I believe that individual doctor was looking at a what if scenario when it was originally presented to a legislative work group, but then people took it because the name on the document was the same as the name on the governor's plan. So. Okay.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because I know that question has arisen a number of times, is what is the timeline? And I didn't think there was a timeline, that it was based on, modeling and remodeling.
Right, and the governor was very clear that he wasn't, like some states, going to give a deadline or a timeline. It was not at the beginning, it wasn't going to be Easter, it wasn't going to be May 1st, it wasn't going to be May 15th. What he was basing all of his judgments on with the Recovery Act is looking at the numbers and making sure that the state is prepared in all of these different buckets of what he felt necessary to be prepared with. And I believe that that's probably very frustrating for businesses. As a matter of fact, I know that it is because I hear from hundreds of them every day. But I think he was very, I think he was respectful of the fact that if something were to change and he gave a date and he had to pull it back, that was going to be a little bit worse than being patient on getting the date, if that makes any sense.
Well, and sort of segueing somewhat awkwardly to your point about sometimes the bad information is what gets out, not the good information. We do have questions coming in about the unemployment and the issues that we've had with unemployment. Now, I know that that you're with the Department of Commerce, not the Department of Labor. But if you could, and as I did mention at the beginning of this call, we're going to be doing another town hall specifically on unemployment following today's briefing and yesterday's hearing. But if you could just speak a little bit to the relationship between the Department of Commerce and Department of Labor, because I think there is some fear that if we reopen before we fix this unemployment issue, that people will not be made as whole as possible before we're reopening.
Right. So just for clarity purposes and a disclaimer, I spent 4 years at the Department of Labor before I came over to the Department of Commerce. So I just want to state that that department, either in the state of Maryland or in any other state in the nation, has never seen anything like this, and hopefully
they're being
never
hammered.
will see anything like this. They are, and that doesn't help the frustration of those that are unemployed right now and who are not getting through the call centers and who can't get online. It doesn't do anything for their frustration, but I believe to start off with that understanding is where we need to go. Now, there has been several, like maybe over a dozen different types of guidance that has come through from the U.S. Department of Labor on the new unemployment world, because not only is the number of individuals increased, but the types of individuals who can apply for unemployment insurance has increased. So that meant an entire new building of a part of the system that would automatically kick people out of the system in every various level if they were an independent contractor or self-employed, right? So I can't speak to what all of that guidance has been just because I haven't tracked all of it over the last couple of months. But there are protective measures of people if they continue to file a web cert, weekly web cert, that regardless of whether or not that fund has come to you already, that fund will come to you, because so it will be backdated. So those that are saying that they have not received several weeks, that money will still be going to that employee until that employee files a web cert saying that they are no longer unemployed, that they are back to their employer.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I would just, double check all of that information with the Department of Labor, and they can give you more specific details on that. But there are safeguards in there for those that are currently unemployed. And I will say at the same time that I'm hearing those types of concerns, I'm also hearing some concerns from the business community themselves, who have some fear that bringing the workforce back to work will be difficult because of the dollar amount that's associated now with the weekly payment of unemployment insurance. And so there are some safeguards there for businesses as well.
Right, and I know that it's a balancing act. Before I let you off the hook, I did actually want, because we do have two CEOs from two Chamber of Commerce, I did just want to open up the mic to them to see if they had any questions from their members, but before you went, because I don't know that we'll have another opportunity.
Yes,
Sure.
So I wanted to introduce CEO of the Severna Park and Arnold Chamber of Commerce League and the CEO of the Greater Crofton Chamber of Commerce, Alissa Santoro, if either of you had questions for the secretary before she leaves.
Yes, actually I do. Secretary Schulz, thank you so much for the information. Very enlightening, and many of our members are concerned, obviously, about revenue because it's pretty much non-existent for the mom and pops at this time, but they're concerned about rent. And when you look at the PPP and the grants and things like that, it just seems like that money is dedicated to specific areas, like PPP is for employment, for payroll. What can our members do? I guess maybe negotiate with the landlords, but is there any kind of bridge funding until they can open again because they're having difficulty paying their rent?
Right, and so obviously that's a big concern, not just for the businesses, but for just members of the general public as well. So there is a deferment on that where if they can't pay their rent, that there is some ability for the landlord to, go into another month or 2 months and kind of delay those payments. I know that is getting very difficult from what I'm understanding for the landlords as well, because they have their own bills that they have to pay. So I would say that looking at, and I hate to fall back on the federal assistance, but I'm going to here because the state of Maryland has lost revenues of about $3 billion at this point in time through the end of this month. And we don't know how much longer this is going to go. So I don't know if there's much more financial assistance at this point in time from state funds, but we are looking at federal funds if we can look to be able to assist folks any further in those types of events. And also I know that Congress is looking for yet another round of COVID funding. And so we would look to that as a potential for that if the states are given the ability to recirculate.
Thank you.
Secretary Schulz, thanks again. I know you've spoken with the multi-chamber not that long ago as well. One of the concerns that I'm hearing, especially from the restaurants, for example, is many of them did actually get the relief for the funds from PPP, but now the concern is that if restaurants are not able capacity until later in the year, obviously going past the point where PPE stipulates that you need to bring back your full staff, are there any plans or anything being worked on? Because obviously now those same businesses that won't be able to fully staff their business until they're able to reopen at full capacity, what are their thoughts? Because now the loan that they were hoping would turn into a grant is now going to remain a loan, and obviously with the tough situation that it is, they're concerned, like, what do we do now?
Yeah. So I think for the first round of the PPP, that funding runs out in June, right? I believe that's
I think it is as well.
Ends up for most folks. And we're really hoping that we can get somewhere. And depending on the governor's final announcement today at 5 o'clock, and following kind of his trajectory of the waiting period in between different phases, and both he and the president's guidelines said, it's healthy, and all those epidemiologists that we talk about. The healthy, safe way is to look at a 14-day period between the different phases to be able to make sure that reopening ourselves to a little bit broader part of the community is going to remain in check. So I think everybody is hopeful. Of course, I can't say that the restaurant business is going to be at 100% capacity at any time in the very near future, but I think we're looking forward to the opportunity when that is the case. And I think this is just, an example of how we can, I hate to say message it, but talk to the general public about, the safer we are now in these smaller phases of reopening, understanding social distancing, understanding, wearing the face mask and indoor atmosphere environments, it is going to help us get to the phases of a larger reopening when we all kind of follow some best practices of what we've been told for healthy lifestyles.
Thank you, Secretary Schulz.
Thank you so much, Secretary Schulz. And thank you for giving us the extra time. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the work that you're doing. And I need to let the secretary go at this point because she's actually, as she said, she's committed sort of across the state right now. But I did want to open it up to our two CEOs. I'm going to start with CEO of the Arnold and Greater Severna Park Chamber of Commerce, Liz League, and you can talk a little bit about what you're hearing from your members, what resources we have, and then I'll open it up to our CEO from the Crofton Chamber of Commerce,
Sure.
Alissa Santoro.
Yep. Thank you so much, Delegate Bagnall, for putting this together, and my colleague, Alissa, good to see you. I am the CEO. My name is Liz League, and I'm the CEO of the Greater Severna Park and Arnold Chamber of Commerce. Just to give you a little bit of background. Oh, hold on. Start my video. Oh, okay. There we go. Okay. To give you a little bit of background, our chamber has been around for 63 years, and it was pretty much the economic development in the area. It was started by a small businessman that owned a hardware store, and he invited all the businesses to gather together and put this whole economic development plan in place to allow businesses to thrive. And my target market, even though I do have some larger organizations as part of our chamber membership, the target is mostly the small businesses, 10 and under employees, maybe 1 to 4 employees. A lot of our businesses are multi-generational, like the Voice Media, Goss's Liquors, places like that are passing their businesses along to 3rd and 4th generations. This came out of the blue for all of us, and I think it's the great leveler because we're all pretty much in the same boat. Just on a chamber standpoint, a lot of people think that the chamber is part of the government. We are not. We're running a business just like everybody else. Our dues and revenue comes from dues and sponsorships from events. Obviously, right now, our revenue is down because dues are hard pressed, and we're not having as many events as we normally would have. We did a survey of the businesses in early April to find out what the impact was, and we got about 100 responses. Over 60% were negatively impacted, understandably. One of the questions that we asked was, how much do you have in reserves? And, again, small businesses, especially in the mom and pop businesses, they run on maybe 2 to 3 months of reserves. And this is not reserves to use if your money drops to 0. This is reserves to get you through if you have to close your place for a couple of weeks, something along those lines. But this whole situation has been a complete disaster to our businesses because they didn't expect to drop down to 0 revenue. And obviously they burned through the reserves very quickly. On average, they had 2 to 3 months of reserves. We did another survey and we had about 60 responses. 80% have been negatively impacted. About 45% have taken advantage of some of the federal government disaster assistance like PPP and EIDL, but of course EIDL ran out of money, so with the second stimulus they'll be applying, but it's been difficult for them because they haven't received the money at this point. Many of them did take advantage of the Maryland grants and the Maryland loans, but most of them, because the information was coming out with the SBA loans, and again, the businesses didn't have a grasp on the long-term effects of this. They thought, well, this will be a short-term thing. It'll be over in a couple of months and I'll get back to normal. So they did apply for PPP thinking we'll just be able to keep our employees and pay them until this is over. Now they're finding that this is not necessarily over. And there are various phases depending on where they fall in the phases for opening, they could be closed for a very long time. So as I mentioned to Secretary Schulz, rent, overhead, their expenses, they're having a very hard time making ends meet. And when things open up finally, we'll have to see who's left standing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. And Ms. Santoro, what are you hearing from your members?
Hey, everybody. So I just, we're hearing a lot of the same stuff. A lot of what we do in the Executive Council, which is the 6 chambers in Anne Arundel County, is we're kind of discussing the issues across the board. We're finding a lot of the same problems, obviously, with people being worried about PPP when things are actually going to be reopened. I actually, one of the things that we do at the Crofton Chambers, we run the Crofton Farmers Market, which is where I'll be heading as soon as we get off the call. It's our second.
Thank you for being on the call. I know this is
oh no,
for everyone right now.
I actually ran away from the chaos of getting set up, so it's all good. But I just want to also echo what Liz said. I mean, one of the big things that we've been trying to clear up the misnomer on is we are not a government agency. We're self-sustained. So oftentimes we're the first call that is being made, but we also are not eligible as a 501c6 to even apply for PPP, EIDL. We've spoken recently with the county executive explaining kind of where we're at, because we are all going to be essential to that rebuild, relaunch process. We're going to be the marketing tools. We're going to be the way that people get the word out about what they're doing, how they can pivot, because most of these small businesses are not going to have marketing firms obviously working with them, right? So they're marketing things themselves. So as those questions come up of how do I pivot? How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I get more involved with social media? We're kind of that tool that connects, and we're kind of that resource that connects those businesses to additional businesses. And when you have all these folks that are hoping they're going to be able to keep their doors open, it's just that much more important wherever other agencies can help, or those businesses that are doing well can help support even the chambers, or just the different businesses. It's going to be key, because we're right now working on with the Maryland Chamber, they've put out a guide of how to kind of rebuild your business, right? Because everybody, it's almost like we're starting over from scratch again. Now, obviously, everybody has started their business at some point over time. So then the hope is that if they've started that business at some point over time, they'll be able to start again. But it's obviously, with everything going on, there's a lot of challenges that go along with that, people that are taking their business to e-commerce. And so we're just trying to really be a major resource for all these businesses across the board, members or not. I mean, the things that we're doing right now, the programs that we're running, many of them are multi-chamber. Even if it's an individual chamber running a specific event, a specific virtual seminar, we've had them open to member businesses and non-member businesses, because right now it's all about all being in this together, regardless of whether they're a chamber member or not. We want to see all business succeed, all business be able to come back. So that has really been our focus within the county. And that's why we have been coming together for a lot of the events as multi-chamber. We have a great network of folks, and we kind of bounce a lot of stuff off each other. So I love working with Liz and of course my other colleagues, but Liz is the one on the call. So.
Well, and I really appreciate both of you being here and all the work that you've been doing. I know our office has been trying to liaison and share information. And to that end, you had mentioned the restarting business guidelines. If it would be okay, I'd be happy to share that on my webpage, because I have a resource. I have a resource page for COVID-19, and I'll go ahead and put that on there as well. But I know you both have spoken to the issues of what the businesses need right now in terms of rent and overhead. One of my big concerns being that Anne Arundel County, of course, is 80% of our businesses are small businesses. And I'm wondering how many of those businesses are new businesses, like established within the first 5 years, because those first 5 years are critical. If you're not getting to the break-even revenue, paying back your loans portion, you can be in real crisis. And I was just reading an article about experts who are concerned that a large percentage of food industry businesses are probably not going to reopen. So I guess my question would be, you know, how many of the businesses in our county and our state are in that sort of first 5 critical years? And what do you need to see from us? What do your members need from the state and from the feds to secure those businesses so they can get their doors open when we're ready?
Liz, you're on mute.
Oh, there you go. You're unmuted.
Okay. Luke's at the command center. I would say that about 20% of the businesses in the greater Severna Park and Arnold area are new. And there were 3, in fact, just right around the corner from us that were poised to open. We were going to have ribbon cuttings for them. They finished their build out. They were all ready to go. And then this hit. So I have not been able to get a hold of the owners of these places. I have to believe, I mean, they were already in debt just with the build out. They had signed their leases, they had ordered their supplies, and then just right at the cusp of opening, they were shuttered. So I know that we had a lot of vacant space over at what's called Continental Realty and the big shopping areas. Some of the larger stores shut down and they were rented, but nobody's moved in. So about 20% are 5 years or less.
That 20%. Is it consistent in Crofton, or are the numbers different?
You know, I mean, Crofton has been built up so much in the last 5 years. I mean, the demographic here has changed drastically. I don't want to randomly pull a number, but I would say it's probably a higher percentage, just simply because between the new Chapel shopping center, between so many different places being built out, the new communities that are coming up, many of which are chamber members, I would say that we probably have an even higher percentage that are new business. We had 3 businesses as well getting ready to open. One actually still did. 5 Guys apparently still did open up on Route 3 this week and had some huge success because everybody was waiting for that to come back. But not everybody's going to be as fortunate with that, as we know. I mean, on the chamber side of the house, I mean, we're being told, you know, if things don't reopen, you know, I think it was by June 30th or so, you know, there's a very high percentage of business that may not be able to reopen just simply because, and we're hearing more announcements every day. I mean, every day you're hearing, I think yesterday it was Steak and Shake, I heard wasn't going to reopen 57 of their restaurants or so. And I know that's a larger business, obviously. So imagine if the larger businesses can't sustain, how are the smaller businesses going to be able to sustain and reopen? And we're hearing more and more of the longtime restaurants in Baltimore and DC, things like that we're hearing more and more closures. But we're going to see, I think, a lot of that from the restaurant industry, as we already know. But in terms of the other businesses, some are still thriving. I mean, that's the thing we have to remember, that while many are suffering, and obviously we would never want to see that for any business at all, there are still businesses that are obviously pivoting their business models, that are even hiring. I mean, I've got a couple businesses that have reached out to me to say, hey, you know, can you put out that we're hiring some more folks, and are trying to make sure more people are employed. Obviously, with 33 million people across the United States right now unemployed, the rehiring process is going to be cumbersome in and of itself.
Huge challenge.
It's going to be a huge challenge. And you want to talk about people that have HR backgrounds, they're going to be that much more pivotal once we really get the relaunch going, because those HR folks are going to be how they all do it. How many businesses are going to stay with telecommuting? There's a lot of folks that are talking about that. They're figuring out that they can run with less staff. So are they not going to fully bring back their staff? And these are the questions that a lot of our members that are not necessarily the business owners, but the employees are going, well, if they're figuring out they could do it without me, am I going to have a job when all this is said and done? Because realistically, they thought they were going to be brought back, but they're temporarily furloughed, or, you know, so things like that are real issues that we're getting. I mean, when Department of Labor website went down at 7:03, I want to say it was, the day that they allowed self-employed, my first phone call was at 7:06 in the morning. Yeah. And it goes with the territory. I mean, Liz and I can both tell you there's no such thing as hours when you're a CEO of a chamber. And we're happy to take them, but what do you do? Like, how how can we just be there? Besides right now, a lot of the times we're a listening ear, providing those resources, but people sometimes just want to vent. I mean, they just want to vent. And
I appreciate that. I mean, I've been returning phone calls just so that there's somebody at the other end of the call. So they're
absolutely,
a busy signal or you know, a voicemail.
absolutely.
And I know that's a real challenge. What do you foresee we are going to be the needs to support our businesses? I mean, I will say I am so impressed with how our businesses have pivoted, how they have changed their models, how they have been so incredibly ingenuitive, and how our communities have tried to support and sustain these small businesses, you know, whether it's going to curbside or whether it's creating Facebook pages to say, these are the businesses that are still operating, please go and spend your dollars there. But what can we do? Again, I always ask the same question. What do you need from us at the state level? What do we need at the federal level? Because the more we know now what we're going to need 2 to 6 months down the road, the more we can start preparing those systems instead of waiting.
I think it's just the funds. I mean, it's a lot of it's coming down to funding. And I think Liz agrees with that same sentiment. And, you know, I feel like no matter how much we put into the system right now, it's still just not going to be enough. Like,
Right.
You know, it's these grants that they put out there in one day and the next day they're closed
They're
out.
gone.
Or, you know, March 23rd was when Governor Hogan had announced his grant for the state, and his goal was within 48 hours. Of course, not even realizing that he'd have 8,000 requests in one day and 40,000 by the end of the first week, and had to shut it down. So I just think the need is so great that as a community, we need to rally behind small businesses. As a community, we need to, where possible, I know everybody's got to make a living. Everybody's got to, you know, be able to sustain themselves. But I would say those businesses that can assist others, the marketing side, things like that, where they can give people tools, that's going to be key. We know that not everybody has the time, but if there's a tool that they can give a small business to help them get up and operational again, that's, you know, maybe a checklist, maybe, I mean, just little things that will make a big difference by the time this is all said and done.
Yeah.
Well, I think your point too about HR, like that we should be building out our HR capacity, because
Absolutely.
once we're reopening, that's going to be a huge a huge industry. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I was going to say that our small businesses are going to do everything they can to keep the public safe and to keep their employees safe. And whatever the protocols or stipulations are, I had a conversation this morning with one of our karate studios, and there are no protocols for them to follow. So he's going to try to work with the health department and other karate places. But, you know, when you think about these various industries that are opening at different times, depending on the proximity, I guess, they have with their customers, massage, therapy and places like that, is they're probably going to be maybe phase 2, I would think. So they've got to go longer paying rent, not having revenue. You know, everything is going to fall into those 3 or 4 categories of when they can open up. And, you know, as time goes on, if they're in the phase 3 part, they're really going to be hurting. So, but they are going to take a lot of caution and follow protocols to keep people safe, their employees safe. So, and I know that County Executive Pittman has some money to give to the small businesses to cover the costs of PPE. So that is a great thing for them to offset some of those costs.
I just have one more question for both of you, and that's sort of following up on what you said. Are there work groups within particular industries? Because to your point, I'm not sure that we are looking at every protocol, because these aren't, you know, not everybody is an expert in these industries. I know that part of the reason we got protocols in the grocery stores was because I put a call into the health department, who put in a call to the Department of Commerce, Department of Labor, because I said, you know, we've got 2 communities that work in grocery stores, and it's an essential service, what are we going to need, what do we need to do? And this might be an opportunity for some of those businesses to proactively say, we want to open, but we need the protocols, and this is our business model, so we adapt.
I think one of, sorry,
No,
Delegate Bagnall.
No,
I was just going to say, one of the things, and it was going back to your last question, even combined with this question, is not only the protocols. Yes, I think if there was some sort of protocol list to help small business, because we do get a lot of those questions. Am I allowed to? What do I have to do? Do I have to have this? Those kind of things that they're asking. The other big question that I'm being asked too, school's out. School's out until we don't know when. So as businesses are reopening, how are we supporting on the childcare side? Because the reality is, if you are being told that you can no longer telework, and you have to come into an office, and you have children that cannot stay home unattended and take care of themselves, but then they can't get into childcare facilities, and summer camps are going to be closed.
Summer camps are closed, yep.
What is being done to make those, to work with those businesses to say, okay, how do we make this work? How do we make it so that you can continue to keep your job versus being able to come in? Or how do we make sure that childcare is not an issue for these folks that are trying to get back to work? Because here's the other thing that's going to happen too. We're still talking about social distancing. We're still talking about all of these things. So in my mind, what I could see happening is, people are going to maybe come up with little groups like, hey, I'm going to send my kids to you one day because I've got to go to work on these days and that day. Are we then opening ourselves up to additional contact tracing issues because we're now going to have people that are desperate that are going to do whatever it takes to come back to work? So that's another big thing, from members that I'm hearing too, is what do I do about childcare if I'm, required to go back in and no longer able to telework?
And that's a great point. That's a really great point. We're coming up on the hour, so I want to make sure that I am being conscientious of people's time, and also I want to clear the way for the briefing, because as I mentioned at the top of the hour, the Economic Matters Committee is having a briefing with the Department of Labor and the administration regarding some of the issues around the unemployment, the pandemic unemployment assistance, and the Beacon one-stop portal. So I want to thank you again so much for being a part of this town hall, and for all of your comment and input. And I'm going to take this back and see if we can resolve the childcare issue, because I think you're absolutely spot on that is going to be a major component of any sort of roadmap to getting our industries open. So thank you once again. If you had a question, we didn't answer it, feel free to email my office. We are constantly reviewing emails 24/7 remotely, and it's heather.bagnall@house.state.md.us. Thank you again to Liz League, to Alissa Santoro, and to Secretary Schulz, who was on the call earlier. And we will have another town hall next week, same time on Wednesday, around education. And I think we'll revisit the childcare question at that point as well.